Okay, hello everyone, Victor Momo from Excel Moments here, and this is a video one of my subscribers did ask that I record, and I've been trying to get to this for months, but different other things. But finally, we've been able to get to it. So what exactly is this video about? What would I be talking about? And why is this important? I'm talking about a function which is versatile, which is very common, and which is regarded in some quarters as the definition of mastery, which, by the way, is not true. But if you do know how to use the function, you can solve a lot of problems we face in our day-to-day Excel life. And this function is called the VLOOKUP function. Now, before you ask me why I'm recording a VLOOKUP function in 2023, I would say to you that not everybody, you know, is on Excel 365. Not everybody has access to the newer functions, XLOOKUP, and every other thing that comes with it. Some people are still using Excel 2016. It is what it is. So sometimes you try to create a balance between those who are not using 365 and those who are using, but I always advise them to see if they can move to 365. But again, if you work in a company, that decision is bigger than you sometimes, and they just stick to what it is that they have. So the VLOOKUP function is a function that is really very common. It is versatile, I would say, but it has a lot of limitations, a lot of which have been fixed in the XLOOKUP function. That's a conversation for another day, because today we are talking about the VLOOKUP function. I'm big on definitions and terminologies, so I would want to start off by maybe defining the function. This is going to be a long video, but I will try and put, not I will try, I will put all, the timestamps, so you can always skip to whatever it is you want. But I want to make it, as comprehensive as possible. There's no way I can do that without taking time. Okay, so now to the function itself. It's one of those functions I struggle to define, right? But we have to find a way to explain it in some way that people can understand. So when I see VLOOKUP, I see two things. I see a V and I see lookup. Lookup, I think I really understand, because that sounds like English to me. Oh, go and look this up. So it's more like go and search for this somewhere, right? So that's that part. The V here is vertical. So it's more like saying go and search for something in a vertical, range, in a vertical list, in something that is arranged vertically. Basically, is what we are saying. For those of you who are familiar with Excel, you will know that we also have the HLOOKUP function. The H there stands for horizontal. So it's like looking up something in a horizontal list. Now, somebody asked me recently, Victor, why is it that, the HLOOKUP isn't as common as the VLOOKUP? I don't have a perfect answer, but I think the answer lies in the structure of our data sets, right? If I expand this a little, you would see that this structure here seems to be the common structure that we have. What do I mean? The records go from, row to row, right? While the features or the attributes go from left to right. Okay, so it means that most times when you're doing a search, you're searching for a record. So for example, I could be looking for a particular customer ID. How do I search for that ID? I come here and I start from the first row, right? And I start going, row by row. So I'm going down vertically until I find the row I'm interested in. And then I kind of bring out, whatever, or return any of the other columns on that row that I may be interested in. This is the structure that is most common. You hardly will find a situation, not like you won't, where this table is kind of transposed, right? So let's transpose this and see if this is a common structure. So here you can come down, Alt ESE, say V. Okay, so look at this structure. So you hardly will see the structure, right? The date goes from left to right, the customer. So it's even a very difficult table for me to understand right now. Maybe even if I formatted it, it may make it a little better, but it looks quite ugly. But that's the point. So because of the structure of the data, this being more common, right? That's the reason why the VLOOKUP is a more common function than the HLOOKUP. Now, where do you use the VLOOKUP? Most times you could just be looking for a particular value in a particular table, and you return maybe the value if it's found, or you don't return it, or you return something else, an attribute associated with the value you're looking for. Sometimes it's relating two tables together. So VLOOKUP is like that bridge to create a relationship between two tables. Look at this example, for example, without being tautological. Okay, so this is a customer table. We just list all the customers I have in my hypothetical business. So it has the customer ID, the name of the customer. I think I need to expand this slightly, and the location of the customer. So this is what I have. So a unique list of customer IDs. So no customer is repeated twice here. Now, this is my sales table. So as I make every sales transaction, let's assume it's recorded, in some automated way. But now there's a problem. In this sales table, I only have the customer IDs. I don't have the customer names. So I have the transaction recorded that yes, this customer so ID bought this on this date, but I don't have the name. But I have a table here that has both the customer ID and the name. So what do? It's more like create a bridge between these two tables. And the only column that can be used to create a bridge is a column that appears in both of them, which in this case could be the customer ID column. So this column here, right, and this. So you can create a bridge using the customer ID. And once you are able to create that bridge, you would be able to return the name. That's what VLOOKUP does. So it means if I'm looking for this Excel, 045, for example, what it means is, okay, I'm going to go to this table and then I start searching the records one after the other from row to row. And once I find Excel 045, I know, yes, this is the row I'm interested in. So what do I need from this row? Is it the ID I need, the name or the location? I need the name, and I can pick the name or solely put that in here. That's exactly what the VLOOKUP does. So it takes this next ID, it goes again, it starts searching vertically from the first row, and it keeps coming down that way till it finds, the row that matches the particular record it's looking for. And then it can return whatever it is you want from that record, any of the other attributes. That's really, where the VLOOKUP, comes in. And this is something we do a lot. We have tables at work. One table has 2 columns, another table has 4, but you want to bring the other 2 into the other one. And sometimes you can't just sort and copy and paste because, again, we not have the same number of rows, number of records. So those are the interesting complications that come with it. But VLOOKUP is really very helpful in this regard. So let's look at the function from a syntax standpoint. It does have 4 arguments. The first one is the lookup value, table array, the column index, and the range lookup. So there are 4 arguments and 1 is optional, meaning that you can supply 3 and the VLOOKUP would still work. But that's also very risky, and I think this is one of the things that has been fixed in the VLOOKUP relative to the XLOOKUP. When you supply the first 3, Excel internally has to put something for the 4th one, even if you don't put anything, meaning it's optional, yes, but Excel will put in something, to make it work. More or less like the code could be written something like, if the user doesn't put in anything, this is what you should use, okay? So the question is, what does Excel use? So that's very important whenever you're dealing with a function that has optional arguments, because whatever Excel may put may not be what would give you your desired results. So you have to be very careful. And if you don't learn that lesson with any other function, the VLOOKUP will teach you that by force. Okay, so that's that. Now, so in terms of the arguments, let's, talk a little about them. We have the lookup value, right? The lookup value is what you are looking for. So if I say, go and search for this ID over in that table, that ID that I'm searching for is my lookup value. So if I'm looking for here, let's assume I'm on this row and I'm looking for XL036. I want to look it up in the customer table. Okay, so this XL036 becomes my lookup value. Okay, so this becomes my lookup value. And interesting thing is that in the table where you're looking for it on the range where you're going to search for it, it must be in the first column. So meaning that if I take this XL036 and I want to search for it here, because what I'm looking for is a customer ID, in this table that I'm looking for it, the customer ID must be the first column. If it's not the first column, the VLOOKUP doesn't work. So let's take the reverse. The reverse is if I was looking for this ID now, starting from here, customer table, and I'm looking for it here. Think about it. If I were to select this bottom table, it's going to look something like this. Okay, but you can see that the customer ID is not the first column in this table. The first column in this table is the date. So if you do a VLOOKUP this way, it's not going to work, because the assumption it makes is that when you're looking for this XL023, I will find it in this first column. That's the first thing. So that will not work. The only way this can work is, yes, if this is my lookup value, then I must adjust my table to look something like this. Meaning that to make sure that the customer ID is the first column, and then Excel can find every other thing, to the right. But sometimes your table is not structured in this manner, so you have to then restructure it. That's one of the problems of VLOOKUP, right? Because, you can't always flip the table the way you want. Think about it if it was even a database that you had no access to, that you just had to read data from. Then, you're kind of stuck. Okay, so, but that's the lookup value, and then that's, a nuance that you need to be aware of. The table array is what I've selected. It's more or less the entire range where that lookup value can be found alongside every other thing you may be interested in returning. So don't mix it up. If you are searching for the customer ID here, you may not be interested in just the customer ID. You may be interested in returning the item or the amount or the name, whatever it is. So the point is you need to select the entire table, not just the column where you feel that whatever you're looking for. So that's your table array. Now, you now have your column index. Your column index is what you want returned. Now, let's look at just what I've selected here, which is the easier way to visualize it than if I selected, the sales table and I'm looking for something in the customer table. So now we assume already that the table array starts from this customer ID. Why? Because I said whatever you're looking for must be found in the first column. So this, for all intents and purposes, is column 1. That's your customer ID column is 1. Your item here is going to be 2, your amount here is 3, and your name is going to be 4. Let's assume, we had something in there. So if you wanted to return the amount, okay, it means that you're interested in column 1, 2, 3. So your column index would be 3. Okay, so the point is the first column, of course, takes index 1. Every other thing, increments that way. So customer ID will be the bridge that ties it together, and then you can choose what you want to return. So the fact that customer ID is what is common doesn't mean I cannot return any other thing. Once I'm able to locate the row or the record I'm interested in, then I can get the other items to the right. Okay, so that's that. Now the range lookup is the last one, which is the tricky part. The range lookup is, are you doing an approximate or an exact match? Now I'll tell you this for free, that most of the work that I've had to do, most of my Excel life, I've had to use the exact match, because most times, it could be maybe a list that has, a staff ID, and there's a staff ID here with maybe the name, and on the other side, there's the staff ID with the location, and you're trying to bring the location or the gender or the age into the table you are in. The staff IDs are unique, meaning that if my ID is XL023, it is XL023. You can't say that if you see XL022, okay, I think that's okay. No, because my ID is my ID, right? So it's the same thing when we maybe got into high school or college, as you maybe call it in the United States. You would always have what we call a matriculation ID, which uniquely identifies you. Okay, so if I'm trying to look that up somewhere, you can't just bring something that looks like it and say, oh yeah, this looks like it. No. So it means that most times you find yourself doing exact match. Okay, so if I were looking for this ID, for example, XL036 on this other list, I may see XL035 while I'm searching. It is close, but I really don't care if it's close. The point is, it is XL036 I'm looking for, and that's what I need to see. So exact match really is what we do 99% of the time. That's a fact. But the challenge here is that for the VLOOKUP, exact match is not the default, meaning that this argument is optional. But if you omit it, Excel would default to an approximate match, and that can give you undesirable results. Okay, so for that reason, even though I know that this range lookup is optional, it's in square brackets, right? And whenever I do a VLOOKUP, I always put in what I want. Okay, so if I'm doing an approximate match, I put true, or you can use 1, right? And then if you're doing an exact match, you use false or you use 0. I can also tell you that because in Excel, true or false is not 1 and 0. It just means any non-zero number is true, meaning that for the true part, I can decide to put any number. If I put 20 there, it will work the same as 1. Anyway, that's just an aside. Okay, so that's it from a syntax standpoint. And those are, I try to combine those two into one, meaning just telling you about the syntax and some things that you need to watch out, for. But we will talk more about that in, the next set of, sheets that we have. Okay, so the keynotes, like I said, the value being looked up for is the lookup value. It must be found, in the first column of the table array. And then the default for the range lookup is true, which means approximate match. So that's one of the things you need to be careful about. But that has been fixed in the XLOOKUP. Let me see what I have in here. Okay, just a simple example, which I think we can start off with. And once you know how to use the VLOOKUP, you know how to use it. But I'll focus a little more on the ones that give us headaches. Why is it that my VLOOKUP doesn't work? Why does it return a wrong answer? What's really going on? So here, this is what's happening here. I have, staff ID, and I'm trying to return the first name in here. Okay, so that's what I want to do. So this ID, I think I'll change this. Oh, that seems to be broken. Okay, let's just fix that. Okay. I think I moved off what I should have used. No problem. Well, I like when my videos are also real and original, show that I'm a human being. So it's okay, to have forgotten something. All right. So now what you want to do is somebody has given you an ID and he wants you to find the first name of that person. How would you do it if you didn't know how to use a function? This is the table where everything can be found, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to say, okay, staff ID, first of all, it must be found in the first column if you really want to use the VLOOKUP. Luckily for us, that's the case here. You now start going from row to row. You check, is this 005? No. Is this 005? You keep going till you find the record you're interested in. Once you get the record you're interested in, which is this, then you step one side to the right, one column to the right, and you get what? Scotty. That's exactly what VLOOKUP does. So it's spanning through, just searching through the vertical list, which is where the V comes in. And then when it finds the record it's interested in, based on the column index you give it, it can choose what it needs to return. So if I want to get the first name, let's see how we'll do that simply. We do a VLOOKUP, start with the lookup value, and always look at the tooltip when you're learning a function. You go to the staff ID, and then you come in here and you select, you could decide to start with the header, doesn't change much, but you could start here too, right? Now, we'll talk about this table array. Let's just write it the way we have it here. That's the table array. I've selected it. Now, the column index number. What am I interested in? I'm interested in the first name. Because I'm interested in the first name, my column index is 2. Of course, it's the second column in the table array. So it's not a bin that is the second column in the Excel sheets, right? It has nothing to do with the column it is in, whether it's KJ. No. In the table array you've selected, what column is it that you want to return? So you do comma and you do 2. Which is first name, and then for this you say exact match so that it looks for ID 005 exactly. I mean, there are a lot of instances where either one would work, but I like to err on the side of caution and tell Excel what I want. Okay, so I do this and you can see that ID 005, it's gotten Scotty for me. Okay, and if I change this to maybe 008, you can see that it gives me what? Wayne. Okay, so that's basically how the VLOOKUP works. It's not more complex than this. There are just many other things that you need to be aware of that get people tripped, and that's what we want to kind of pay attention to. Okay, so that's that. It's not more difficult. We've done a VLOOKUP, and so you can go celebrate. Your first VLOOKUP is done. All right, so let's take a look at just a few things which may sound repetitive in some sense, but those are the things you need to pay attention to. Executing the VLOOKUP is not the problem. Like you see, I just did that in seconds. Question is, okay, when the answer isn't what you're expecting, what do you do? What could have caused it? Those are some of the things that we need to talk about. And when VLOOKUP can't find the value, VLOOKUP will give you an hash NA. Everybody says it's not available, right? So meaning that the record you're looking for, I can't find it. Okay, it's not there. So it gives you a hash NA, and that's good to know. But we'll see, how to handle that. So now, the first thing here that we need to note from a keynote standpoint, we'll go through all of this, is that VLOOKUP looks only to the right. It can't look to the left. Without being tricky. When I say without being tricky, because there's a way to make it look to the left. I think I will show that further down the line. But the point is, based on how this function is designed to work, it doesn't look to the left. And why doesn't it look to the left? Because really, think about it. If you're looking for the staff ID and you select this, as your table array, it always assumes that, the first where you're searching for, like whatever you're searching for is found in the first column. So if it is found in the first column, there can't be any column before the first column. There's no zeroth column, right? So there's no zeroth column, there's no -1th column. The only columns that exist are either that column itself or any column to the right. So what Excel is seeing right now is whether you have this spot to the left or not is not important. Because I'm looking for staff ID and that's what I'm looking for. This is the table to Excel, and this is what it is in his mind. So anything to the left doesn't appear. The table goes from column 1 here and goes to the right. So if I wanted to return spot now, for example, this is spot. How do I do that with the VLOOKUP? Because think about it. I can do a VLOOKUP here. I look for this. I will have to select this as my table array. I can't select this. If I select this, what's going to go wrong? The problem here is that I'm looking for an ID. An ID is found in the second column, not in the first column, because it will never find the ID in the spot column. So this is not going to work. So the only option I have really is to select this. But once I select this, I set myself up. I've excluded the spot. So how do I then, look for it if I wanted to find it? So that's the problem. What people may now do is you now have to do something like this. You may copy this right to the right. Okay. And then you can now come and do a regular VLOOKUP. Let's look for this. We'll select this and go all the way to the right. Okay. And in terms of column index, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we pick 5 and do this. Okay. Right. And we get the answer. But now you've had to add an extra column to your data, or you could have done a cut and moved it, but you can't always be moving things around because in some other case it would favor you, in some other case it wouldn't, and sometimes you don't have access to the table array or the database the way we're doing it here, where we're just looking at the lookup value and the table is just right in front of us. Okay, so that's a limitation of the VLOOKUP, and that's one of the challenges. So if you ever have a situation where you want to look up to the left, you can't do it using the regular VLOOKUP. Why? Because for you to do that, it means your index may have to be negative. Okay, something like this, which does not make any sense. It can't see it. It starts from column 1 and the table goes to the right. Any other thing behind that column 1, it's not seen. So that's one of the things you need to note. Depending on how your data is structured, you may be able to get it, you may not be able to get it to work, like I said, without being tricky. But I don't want to talk about, the trick for now. Okay, so that's one. Let's see the next one here. Oh, I think, okay, no, I have that opened. Okay, so VLOOKUP does an approximate match by default. Most times you need an exact match. Okay, so yes, so it does an approximate match by default. So meaning that if I wanted to, for example, I'm trying to get, these are some scores, and this is maybe the table I'm using. So this is like the grading we have like in our universities, maybe in my university or college, as you guys call it over in the States, right? So if you get anything between 0 and 40, that's an F, or 0 and 39 rather. 40 to 44 is an E, and so on. In some other places it's different. You start to have, A plus and A plus plus. Okay, so if I were looking for 100 here, like if I scored 100, what would be my grade? Right. If I wanted to do this, I would do, VLOOKUP. I look for 100 and I can look for it, let's say here, meaning that the score will be found in the first column and then it can return the grade in the second. If you rearrange this table and move grade to the first and bring the score to the right, then you can't use the VLOOKUP, right? Because in that case, your score will not be found in the first column that you need. So these are some of the things you have to be deliberate about. You have to structure, your table array in a way that your VLOOKUP will work. Okay, so now I can now tell it I want to return, column 2, meaning that I return the grade. So for the range lookup, I cannot do an exact match in this case, right? Why can't I do an exact match? Because an exact match means that if I'm looking for the score 100, 100 must be here. If it doesn't see 100, it will tell me, it can't find it. So take the example. Let's make it, an exact match. Okay. So you see it says #NA. Why? Because it looked for 100 in here. It can't see 100 because there isn't any 100 as we both can see, or we all can see. Okay. So the only way you can make this work, if at all, is you can skip that last argument. And if you skip the argument, Excel will do an approximate match, meaning that it's going to look for, the highest value that is just lower than whatever it is you're searching for. So if you're looking for 100, it looks at that table. What's the highest value I have there that is just lower than what I'm looking for? It's most likely 70. And it will default to that. I'm going to talk about the approximate match later on, but, just giving you an idea of what it's doing. And then you can see that now it gives you an A. So once you omit the last argument, Excel defaults to an approximate match. But most times, except in cases like these, or sometimes when you're doing some discount calculations, that if you don't get up to this, this is your discount. If you get up to this, this is your discount. You don't really do an approximate match as much as you do, what's it called? An exact match. But again, that may depend on, your line of work. Okay, so that's something to note. So the reason why I emphasize that, always include whatever it is you want. If you want an exact match, please put it in there. Okay, all right. So ensure to provide an argument for the range lookup if you need an exact match. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so now the other thing you need to know is that VLOOKUP finds the first instance of the lookup value. That's another thing, because sometimes we are trying to use VLOOKUP in a way that is not designed to work. Okay, so let's take an example. You can see here that we have, let's see, I have James. There's James in Lagos, there's James in Nairobi, right? So now I'm trying to look for James. Let's see if this one is still working. Okay, good. So I have James here. All right. So now those are the two James that you have. You now want to find his location. So how do we do that? We still do a VLOOKUP, right? So we're going to look up. How are we going to do this? We're going to do a VLOOKUP. What's our lookup value? Our lookup value is James, because we are looking for James. What's our table array? You should have learned how to do this by now, which is that you can't start off with the date. Why? Because James will not be found in this column. James will be found here. So this is what I'm going to do. So this is going to be my table array. Okay. All right. Now I put a comma and it says column index. What am I interested in? I'm interested in location. What's the location? What column is the location based on my selection? This is salesperson is 1, location is 2. Okay. So this is going to be 2. And then, I would say an exact match, 0, and I close the bracket. Now you see that James is found in Lagos, but there's James in Nairobi, and this may be the James that you're interested in. Okay, but VLOOKUP always finds what? The first. Let's change this to, who else is there? John. Okay, you can see John is finding Mexico City. It's not going to find, Stockholm. Again, the XLOOKUP can do that when you have, maybe first instance, last instance, you can choose which one you want. But again, I'm not trying to, because it's a VLOOKUP video, so my job here is not to discredit VLOOKUP, but just to tell you some of the limitations also, and some of the things, to watch out for. So you're not trying to use VLOOKUP in a way it's not designed to work. And maybe it's also whet your appetite, so you see why maybe good, to, start to transit gradually, to the XLOOKUP. So that's something you need to be aware of. So if you ever want to find multiple instances, second, third instance, you need to think of something else, or you need to get very creative. But the VLOOKUP, in the way it's just designed, would not work that way. Okay, so that's one thing to be aware of. Okay, so the other thing is for the approximate match. Maybe here I can talk about it in a little more detail. All right, so for the approximate match to work, VLOOKUP needs the data sorted in ascending order. Now, this is something that a lot of people really don't get, but there are two things that you need to be aware of. There's an example down the line, but I kind of decided to talk about all these, gotchas here, right? I think I already did this here, but yeah, I can take this out. This is straightforward. Okay, so now this is the proper grading here, this one here. So maybe I just highlight this. Okay, so this is the proper grading that you need, in the sense that it's easy to follow here. Because everything is sorted alphabetically, it's easy to see that 0, to 39 will be F. Once you hit 40, it means you have hit an E. Once you hit 45, it means you hit a D, and that will go all the way to 49. Then 50, you hit a C, and so on. Okay, but now sometimes the way people put the data, it's not putting in this way. And again, think about it. Sometimes you could decide that you don't want it this way. You may do it in the other way, which is maybe you sort it descending, right? So you start with 70A. It can still be read in the same way. I can see here that 0 is F all the way to 39. Once I hit 40 is E. So I still can understand it in both ways. But the question is, how does Excel understand it? So Excel can only understand it when it is sorted ascending, meaning that the lowest number that you possibly can have, should be the first, and then the highest, band, you have should be at the bottom. It has to be sorted this way for you to get it. So let's take an example. Look at this one. Somebody has sorted it in this way. Just wrote all the bands, 45D, didn't pay attention to the sorting. Now he wants to then get the grades for this course. So of course he's going to do a VLOOKUP, right? He's going to select the lookup value. His table array is going to select this. Okay, let's start with that first. And then he's going to do column index, which is going to be 2. He would leave the range lookup because he knows it's an approximate match, right? It's an approximate match. So he's going to then say, maybe close the bracket. And then, right. And now you see that 53, gives you an F. We all know here that 53 from this table, the right table, 53 should be a C because it's somewhere between 50 and 60. But now it gives you an F. That's because of how this table is. This table is really messy because now, if it assumes, Excel always assumes that this data is sorted ascending order rather. So now it's seen a 50C, it's seen a 0F. So it feels like, oh yes, it's greater than 50. So it's less than the next one. And then, it returns an F for you. Okay, so if you ever want to get the approximate match to work, there are two things you need to be aware of. The first one is the very common one that I've repeated a couple of times, which is the fact that the data has to be sorted in ascending order. But not just that alone, you must put this lowest value as the lowest band. This is something that I've seen happen a couple of times. If you change this table and you select only this, right, and you skip the 0 and F, anybody who scores below 40, Excel won't find that person because Excel assumes, right, that 40 is the lowest possible score that you can have. So whenever you're setting up this table, make sure that the lowest possible, value you have starts up as the first row. Okay, you understand what I mean? So once you have 0 now, it means that any value lower than 0 cannot be found. Okay, it assumes that 0 is the lowest value. So now imagine I then decide to change this. Now let me do the VLOOKUP now using the right table. I was getting an F there for 53. Now if I come here, you can see now that I'm getting a C, okay, which is actually the right value. But the point is that Excel won't sort that data itself. You need to have it sorted. But with XLOOKUP, it works pretty fine now. Okay, I purposely stayed away from taking this formula down, but I could decide, to do that. But the point is, I haven't mentioned something which is very important, which I would mention now, and which is one of the biggest problems that we have with VLOOKUP, which is not a problem with the way VLOOKUP is designed, but in terms of the execution, why we don't get it to work the way we always want it to work, which is the fact that the table array, most times we are not conscious of, what the table array is. And when we drag our formula down, we forget that the table array is not static in the way we've written it. So let's take an example and see what I mean. It becomes clearer as you do it. So now I want to find the, what's it called? I want to find the first name, maybe last name and country for these 3 IDs. Okay, so these are the IDs. And then this is the lookup table. So the same thing, I'm going to do a VLOOKUP. We know this now. I take this as my lookup value. I'm going to start my table. Somebody's like, why did you even put this spot here? Well, just to create some confusion. Okay, so I select this as my table array. Okay, and then what am I interested in? For this one, I'm interested in first name, right? So for the first name, I know that that's column 2. So I say column 2 and I say 0. Okay, and it gets me Usain, and I think that's correct. Yes, you see ID 07, you see that's Usain. Now if I wanted to take this to the right, first of all, to get the last name, if I just drag this, I already even have one problem, even beyond the normal problem I have. What would that be? If I drag this to the right, you may say, oh, okay, well, looks like, oh, that worked, but see what's happening here now. What am I looking for now? It is Usain I'm actually looking for in this range, and it works. The point is that what my lookup value is supposed to be, my lookup value is supposed to be the ID, right? But look at this. When I started here, the formula here was C80. When I come here, the formula here is D80. But it's supposed to still remain C80 because that's the ID. So I should have put, $1 in front of the C to make sure that it looks up, that particular value. So I can fix that one first. Okay, let's do that. So now let's copy this across. Let's see what happens. Oh, okay, that doesn't work. So why doesn't it work? Because by the time you get here now for the last name, can you see the table array? This is not the common one. The common one is really row-wise. But see what has happened. As I copy the formula from left to right, you notice that what happened? The table array shifted. The table array should have started from what? This ID column. But now it's shifted to the right. That's one problem most times we have with the VLOOKUP. The fact that the table array is not always fixed. Okay, so now if I wanted to fix that, because now I'm seeing that the table is moving from what, left to right, I'm like, okay, all right, I think I'm just going to put $1 in front of the C here, and I'm going to put $1 in front of the F. That way I will solve that problem. So let me copy this now and see. Okay, all I will change here is that for the last name I will make it 3 because that's the third column, and then for country I will make this 4 in terms of what I'm returning. Okay, and now everything is fine. So you see Usain, Bolt, and Jamaica. So that's okay. So the formula really is kind of okay now. Why? Because I put $1 in front of the columns. So as I moved from left to right, you notice that the table array still remained, the same. It didn't shift from left to right. So now I'm like, okay, good, I have a formula that works. So I'm going to copy this for the other IDs, bring them down. Okay, now I have a problem. ID 002. I'm getting an #NA. I can see clearly that, ID02 is there, and that's Lionel Messi. I can see it, it's there. And I know that that's my table array. So what has gone wrong? Let's look at it. Double click this, look at your table array. What has happened? Your table array has shifted, right? You started off your table array in row 70, but as you drag the formula down, your table array started from 71. As you dragged it down, you started at 72. So now you've gotten to a point where the ID you're looking for, you can see, is above the table array. So how can Excel find it? Excel can find it because whatever Excel will find is within the table array. So this is where you now have a problem. Okay, so which is the reason why whenever you do a VLOOKUP, the first thing we always do is that for the table array, we always make sure that we have total absolute references here, okay, which you can use your F4 to toggle. Okay, so you make sure that you are locked both on the rows and on the columns. So it can't move, down when you drag down, it can't move right if you drag right. This is how to write it. So make sure it is locked everywhere. And you understand why. If not, your table array would be moving. Okay, so once you do that and say you copy this here, okay, well, okay, the two, I need the 2, the 3 and 4. I mean, there are ways I can fix this. I'm just trying to be very amateur in this in these examples, so I don't get into my typical elements. Because people are watching and say, Victor, why are you making it like you have other ways you can do? I know, but well, let's get people to understand. And I want the video to be understood by people who are not necessarily the experts. Okay, so that's why I do it the way I've done it. So now you can see that everything works. So this is a very important lesson for you. The table array must be fixed. One way you can get around it is sometimes you could use a named range, meaning that, you could select this whole range, right? And you give it a name. For example, you could just do a quick and dirty one, and I call it maybe quick dirty. That's my range. If you do that, if you come here and let's say you do the same VLOOKUP. So let's do this. Let's just do this here. The problem we had before. So do this. Now, we selected this range. That's what we did. Okay, but now if you do quick dirty, which is the name there, and you say column index 2, 0, let's go, let's bring this down. This works now. You don't need to make anything absolute or not. Why? Because you used quick dirty. By the time you drag the formula down, it's not going to become quick dirty 1, quick dirty 2. Quick dirty is going to be fixed there. So by just using a simple, named range, you solved the problem. And that way, your table array would always remain your table array. You could also use a table. So you can see this is not an Excel table, right? If I used an Excel table, then of course, once I select a range, then that's what happens. So let's take an example. So let's take this, let's bring this here. Let's use Control T, make it a table. Okay, so now that's a table. So let's do a VLOOKUP here. So do a VLOOKUP of this ID, and you're looking for it. You can do this. Okay, so do you see what it does? It gives you the table name, right? So because it gives you the table name, by the time you drag this down, you will still have the same thing. But that table name is going nowhere. It's not changing. Okay, so you can either use a table, and that would help your table array, so you don't have to think about the dollars, or you can use a named range, and that kind of solves the problem. Okay, so once you know that, it becomes easier to execute, right? So that's one of the things that causes problems sometimes. People forget that, and then they drag their formula down, and it just doesn't work. Okay, so let's see. The next one is that VLOOKUP, supports wildcards. So this is something interesting you can also do with, VLOOKUP, for example. So let's say you're trying to look here. You can see that I have basketball, I have football, basketball, football. If I wanted to find, just maybe the first instance of the word ball. Okay, so I wanted to find maybe now, in this case, I'm not using the staff ID. I may just find, okay, the first name, last name, and country. So I want to find here. So I'm looking through this list and I want to see the first time ball is mentioned, which is here, right? Okay, and I want to then maybe return the first name or the last name or the country of the person. So now I can't come here and say my search criteria is basketball, because that means I'm specifically looking for basketball or football. All I can do is I can just put ball, right? I can put ball, and then now I do my VLOOKUP. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to do VLOOKUP. My lookup value, I can't just select ball, because if I select ball, it means that Excel is going to look for ball exactly. So it's going to check in here to see a cell that has only the word ball, which it is not going to find. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I won't do that. I would say, I'll put an asterisk, okay? meaning that there could be some characters before the word ball. And I don't even know, there could be, some characters after the word ball. Don't assume it's always football, and it ends there. It could be anything. So I could say there's some characters before and there could be some characters after. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to do here. And then I say table array. Now I have to start from this column. Why? Because that's the only way it's going to find what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is in the sports column. So that becomes my, first column. So I select this range, right? Well, I could decide to put the F4, but because I'm not dragging maybe downwards in the sense, I may just leave that, but not to worry. Now for the column index, I'm interested in first name. First name is going to be where? This is column 1, this is column 2, this is column 3. So first name is in column 3. So I do 3 here, and then I do. So let's see. So what does it return? So it's able to successfully see that basketball is here, and this returns what, Michael? If I change this one to say first ball sports, let's see what happens. Okay, you can see that now it returns Usain because it has found what, the word ball somewhere within that text. So the wildcard, is also useful in Excel sometimes, in the VLOOKUP rather, because you are looking for a value and it's not the exact value you are looking for. You're just looking for any record that contains, right, that particular string. Okay, if I weren't pointing to a cell, I could also have just written it here, just so you see. You could also have written it here as maybe what's it called? Let's see. Star ball star. Sorry about this one here. Should be asterisk. Okay, so you could have done this. It's the same thing, but what I just prefer is having it dynamic so that if it's not ball I need tomorrow, if it's key, for example, hockey, let me change it back. Okay, so yeah, this is the right one. So if I change this to key, you can see it gives me what, win, because it has seen key in hockey. So I just prefer to put it in a cell and point to that rather than hard coding it in the formula. But the point is that that's what it translates to. It's like an asterisk, the text and asterisk. Okay, so that's that. So that's something you can also make use of. VLOOKUP is not also case sensitive. So for example, if I were looking for football here and I say return the ID for the sport, I could do a VLOOKUP. Right, select football. I come here, I select this as my range, put my F4. Now you know that I do 2, I do 0. Okay, you can see it finds it. Let's take it down. You can see that for these 3 footballs, it found it the same way, right? So for it, whether it is capital F, small letter F, all lowercase, all uppercase, mixed cases, it's all the same thing. So you have to be aware of that. If you want to do a case-sensitive VLOOKUP, then you have to get a little creative and tricky. Okay, but just know that there's no difference as far as VLOOKUP is concerned on the face of it. It's all one and the same. Okay, so something else. Returning multiple columns. Okay, yeah, maybe this is where I move from being a what will I say, an amateur into a slight professional. Okay, so imagine you wanted to return first name, last name, and country together, which is like what, 2, 3, and 4, right? So it's the same VLOOKUP, but the way I've been doing it is I write the formula once, then I move it, and it's like, this guy, you should be smarter than this. I mean, I apologize. So you do VLOOKUP, you can select this, right, and then we take the table array, and I take this as my table array, for example. Here, and then I lock that. So for my column index, now I need column 2, column 3, column 4. Many ways you can do it. Again, because Excel now spills, that really helps. So some people could decide, to use curly brackets and just do, I need 2, I need 3, I need 4. Okay, so that's like saying you are returning 3 values all at once. And you can see that you get that. If you just copy the first one, pretty much populate. So the formula is sitting in one cell, right? The formula is sitting in just one cell, and then it spills, to the others. So that's taking advantage of the fact that, I can spill. But if I didn't want to do that, and for example, I wanted to just write the formula in a way that I could drag it to the right and it will work. First of all, I need a dollar in front of the C here, okay? Just to make sure that it's always looking up the ID. Now, for the column index, the first one I need this to be 2, right? So I could say maybe the column where I'm at. But I know that the column where I'm at now, what column is this? Let's take the tooltip out. This is column D now, okay? So the column where I'm at really is going to give me 4 because D is column 4. So I could say, oh, I do 4 minus 2 in such a way that by the time I move this formula to the next column, right, that column function is going to give me 5. 5 minus 2 will now give me 3. By the time you move to the next one, which is F is 6 minus 2 will give me 4. And I've created my 2, 3, 4. But that is doing it in individual cells. Okay. So, but you could do that and do something like that. Okay. So that's you saying by the time you take this to the right, it still works. Because when it comes here, by the time you come here, you are evaluating this column now, you can see, right? This column here gives you 5. But by the time you come here to Jamaica, because you're now in column F, right, and you select this one, yeah, you see it gives you 6. So you're just taking advantage of, that function to do it. But you could have done it, in one, just the way I did it over there. And you could also have spewed everything all at once. But let me not get ahead of myself. Okay, so let's look at this one, which is kind of using, VLOOKUP to do, two-way lookups. This one is interesting, right? Why is it interesting? Because, for example, you may want to pick a particular product and you're trying to get, the amount for a particular size of that product. So it means that, okay, I need to buy maybe orange juice, and there's a small pack, there's a medium, and there's a large pack. Now, I'm interested in, okay, maybe the medium. It means I'm interested in 1.67. Why is it a two-way lookup? Because whatever product you're interested in, VLOOKUP has to come row by row to figure out the products that you're interested in. When it then figures that out, it now needs to also figure out, okay, well, what size is he looking for this product? So it means it now has to go from left to right. So it's like it's looking up, down the rows. It's also looking, through the column. So let's see. You can select a product here. Let's say we select salt and we select medium. So what do we need here? Okay, we need 2.21, right? That's the answer we need. So how do you do that? Maybe the VLOOKUP alone may not be able to do it, but it starts off with the VLOOKUP. The first thing I know is I'm going to do VLOOKUP, and I'm going to look for this salt, right? Now, it means that Excel is going to go from row to row, trying to find the row that corresponds to that salt. So I'm going to select this as my table array. I could decide to lock that. Now, for the column index is now, the tricky bit. How do I get the column index? Meaning that, am I interested in small, medium, or large? I don't know. I can't just put a number and put 2, put a number and put 3. I need to figure that out. Okay, but I know the range lookup. The easy one I know is that the last one I'll do an exact match. So let me do the easy part I know. Okay, so now that's done. So now let's now come. So I haven't done anything, of course, for the middle part, which is, the column index. So how do I figure out the column index? Whatever the person chooses, if the person chooses medium, I need to be able to check through these headers and figure out that maybe medium, based on this data set, right? Medium is going to be column 3. Why will I say 3? Somebody's thinking 2. My table array that I've chosen, see where it starts from. It starts from the product column. So medium will be found in 3. Okay. So whatever you do, just have that at the back of your mind. Okay. That you need to be returning an answer of 3. So you can use for this the match function. So this is where the VLOOKUP meets, the match. This is where somebody would probably just use an index match, right? Or maybe even an XLOOKUP and a double XLOOKUP. But we can just put the match in here to figure out what column we're interested in. So I can do match, right? And I'm looking for this text medium. What some people may do is they search for it here, right? And when they get it, they do +1. Because if you search in here, medium will give you 2. But you need to know that it is column 3 based on the table array you selected. But I may just prefer to select from the beginning. So I save myself the stress of even, adding +1. And I put 0 there to say that I want an exact match still. Okay? Reason that if there's medium, mediums, and I'm interested in medium, then it needs to know it's an exact match. And I do enter. Okay? And then I have the answer, 2.21. All right. So if I decide to do orange juice and let's say large, okay, so that value there gives me 2, as you can see. I could also do one more, maybe thyme. And if you guys know thyme, some interesting flavor. It makes your food smell like you know what you're doing, and do small. And then you see that we have 1.48. So it's a VLOOKUP, but just using a match to get the column index number, and you fuse that together and it works perfectly. So these are a lot of things that you probably need to know about the VLOOKUP. Some things that you need to be aware of to make sure your VLOOKUP works. Some other things that help you make the VLOOKUP work too in some, tricky way that it may not be designed to work. Let me show you, something else. I have a few other things, but well, let me just show you this. This is one of those interesting ones. It's just to make a point, really, that whenever you're looking for, the lookup value, sometimes the lookup value is formatted in a certain way in one table. I could easily just, get rid of this, right? So everybody just ignore error. Okay, so everything looks fine. So what happens sometimes is that your lookup value is formatted in a certain way in one, and it's formatted a different way in the other. Now, this one may appear very obvious to everybody that, okay, if I look at my ID now here, and I want to look for the IDs here, it looks like they're different, right? But okay, let's assume I just did maybe a custom format here, of 4 zeros. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Now, if you look at this, it looks to you like you're seeing exactly the same thing. So somebody says, okay, can you find for me the first name? Very easy. You quickly jump into your VLOOKUP. I'm used to the X now. So you do this, right? And you select this as your table array. You're so excited, like, wow, simple question. Okay, now you're interested in the first name, which is column 2. So you do 2, and then you do 0. Then you close the bracket. And then this shows up, #NA, meaning I cannot find 0446. You're like, Excel has started again, doesn't know what it's doing. Okay, take this down. All of them are #NAs, and you can see this is 446. You can see this is 446. It's too obvious that this is the same thing. But what's really going on? The point is that the lookup value must be found exactly, in the table array. If it's not, Excel is not going to return it. When I say found exactly, this is why sometimes I emphasize the fact that what you see is not necessarily what Excel sees. Formatting can, mask things and make things appear like what they aren't. Okay, so you have to be sure what is Excel seeing. It's not about what the human eye sees. Now, the easiest way I can maybe check if Excel is seeing the same thing is just to do a simple test. I'll say, is this equal to this? That will be my simple test. Okay, Excel tells me false. Now you're like, oh, no, this is not true. Okay, maybe I start off with the length. What's the length of this one? Okay, Excel says 4. What's the length of this one? Excel says 3. You're like, oh, wait, how come? This is 3, So now you start to see that, oh, there's something wrong. But I may not even get to this level first. The first thing I will start with is, are they the same? If they are not the same, then there's obviously something wrong. So now what's the difference between the two of them? This one here, this is a number. All I have done is I have played around with the formatting, to make it appear as, 4 digits, basically. But the value fundamentally hasn't changed. This is just a formatting. If I change this now to general formatting, okay, now you see the real thing in there. This one, these are numbers. They are just formatted to look like text. These ones here, as you can see, if you look at the formatting, these are text. Okay, so therein lies the problem, in the sense that one is text, while the other is number. And if they are not the same, then it doesn't work. This is just something you need to know. So when your VLOOKUP doesn't work sometimes, there are many other examples. I can show you 1 or 2 others, but this is one of those ones that sometimes you can't figure out. But the point is, just do a simple test. Are they the same? If they are not the same, it doesn't work. So what can you do to make this work, right? Different ways. You can choose to address it from different sides. The first thing is you can decide to format this as a text to make sure it matches with this, right? See, if you use the text function here and you put 4 zeros here, okay, you basically now have the same thing. So you can test this one, test it with this, and that now is fine. So it means that I can just do that in my VLOOKUP. So I can do VLOOKUP. Instead of looking this up, this will not be my lookup value because I know it won't find this. I would then, transform that using the text function and do 4. So this becomes my lookup value. So my lookup value is now correct in the sense of it will give me exactly what I need on the other side. Okay, so I do that and then I select this range. Okay, put my dollar and then do 0. Okay, oh, sorry. I forgot the column index. Let's say 2, 0. Okay. All right. So now you can see we have it. Oops. Sorry about that. Okay. I could have double clicked. So now you can see that this works. Okay. Now that's how, most people would solve it. Now, what if I wanted to do it in the reverse? But I guess you followed that. It's simple. It's just what you need to do is always make sure that the lookup value on both sides is the same. Now, the side you choose to go from is probably up to you. This one seemed like the easy one. But sometimes I insist that you could decide to change, the table array. What I did here was I changed the lookup value, right? It's the lookup value I transformed, as you can see. Okay, but I could have decided to transform the table array instead. So how would that have looked like? That means I would have done, VLOOKUP, okay, and I select this as my lookup value. Now for my table array, because I know that what I'm looking up here, these are numbers, I can decide, here to do this plus 0. That's what I would have done. But now here's the problem. This plus 0 will work for the employee ID, but the first name and last names may not work. So what I'm trying to do is this. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to say, let's close this and let me say add 0 to it. If I do this, these employee IDs that are text will become numbers. That's correct. But the problem is this first name and last name. Those ones get messed up. If you kind of maybe see what's going on here, let's see. All right, so you see that the numbers are fine. You can see the numbers where they should be, but you can see hash value errors everywhere. Okay, so what you could do is just get a little tricky. You could just say if error, meaning that if this evaluates to an error, it should just return the same thing for you. So what's going to happen there? The first column, which is text, will be transformed to numbers, and that will be fine. The other ones will be returned as errors. But you have said if it's an error, return the same thing. So meaning that it will then give you the values you need. I called this, I think I did a video on it where I called it making an unnecessary point, which is why do it in this direction when you can easily do it in the other way. But it's to make the point that what you are trying to do, your objective is simple. You want the lookup value to be the same in both, the lookup value and the table array. That's basically what you're trying to do. So you close the bracket on this. I can do 2, I can do 0. I think this should work. Yeah, and that's it. Okay, so I can just double click this down. Okay, so you see that we have basically the same thing. The points here being, again, without sounding like a broken record, the lookup value must be exactly the same in both if you want it to work. So always check what is different. When you know what is different, then you can fix it. Let me show you maybe just one more thing. Okay, take this for example. So what I want to do here is simple. I have some IDs and I want to find their first names and their location. Now I'm going to look them up here. This table is my less like my master table. This is my master table, and I'm going to do that lookup there. So I'm going to come here, and it's a simple VLOOKUP, right? So I do VLOOKUP. I look for this ID, and then I come to the master data table. I know that because I'm starting with the IDs, I need to start from this column. So I'm going to start from this column, and I select the whole thing, function F4, right? Okay, and then I put a comma. So in terms of my column index, what do I need? I think I was looking for first name, so I think that's column 2. I'm just going to go with 2 anyway. If it's not what I need, that's not a problem. Close the bracket. Okay, so yeah, that's actually what I need. So I need this. And now I take this down. Now you start to see some interesting things. Here, IBD0023. It's giving me a hash ending, meaning it can't find it. I can go over to the other side, and I probably can see that this is the ID here, straight up, right? So this is the ID, IBD0023, but you can't find it. And it's not a problem with the table array. Like, if you see, the table array has the absolutes there, so that's not the thing. It starts from C2 to K102. It's still the same thing here. Okay, so the first thing I may just test again, like if I can see the value physically, is I do this, I test, just check. That's my first test. I see false. Once I see false, I'm like, oh, there's a problem. So what's the problem? The point is they are not the same. But what's the difference? There are different things that could happen. Like one I showed you now, which is the formatting. One is number, one is text. What's it in this case? Okay, so I can start off maybe by just doing a test of a len here. Okay, so it says it's 11. But when I look at the characters here, I expect that this should be 7, right? This is IBD0023. So this is 7 characters. Why is it 11? So I can come into the cell. And then, of course, once you double click, you see that, there are extraneous spaces there. That's the problem. So on the other side, you don't have the spaces. Here, you have the spaces. And that's why it's not working. You can take out the spaces, right? and that fixes it. But if you had a lot of names that you're returning results for, you don't want to be deleting, the backspaces one after the other. So you just simply use a function that helps you. So instead of just looking for C3, you can just look for trim of C3. So trim is going to get rid of, leading and lagging spaces and also multiple spaces within. So once you do this, let's take this down now and see if that at least fixes most of it. And everything is fine. But the point is, first of all, the lookup value must be found exactly the same way on the table array. If it's not found exactly, the question is what's different, right? Is it the formatting? Is it like you have extra spaces or some extra unwanted characters? You need to find out what the difference is. Once you find out what the difference is, you fix that. And once you fix that, your VLOOKUP would work. But these are some of the things that, I have seen. There's a lot more, but I haven't even checked the time for the video. My mind tells me that I've been talking for like maybe 30, 35 minutes. So I'm like, okay, I think this is a good point, to stop this video. If anybody does take a look at this video and, doesn't understand VLOOKUP, well, then maybe I haven't done a good job. But I think I've explained it pretty well and shown you, different scenarios and some things you need to watch out for. The other thing most times is, sometimes when you do a VLOOKUP and you see, #NA, it's good to see the #NA so you know that, the data you are looking for maybe wasn't returned, for any reason. But if you don't like the #NAs, what we just do in those cases is we just put an if error around it. But that sometimes is running away from the problem, whereas there could still be a real problem. So meaning in this case, I could have said, that if the VLOOKUP returns an error, right? Like this #NA. I don't want to see errors. It doesn't make my workbook look clean. I want to do this. Okay. Now see what happens when you do that. Those places look like, oh, they're just blank. Now this looks good from, a visual standpoint, but it doesn't address the problem. Why is it not seeing these values? Are these values really there and it's not finding them? What's the issue? So as much as it's good to do the if error or know the if error, you must be able to understand the problem and drill down to why, that problem exists, because this sometimes masks a real problem. But if I know for certain that, okay, everything will be found and any NA is something that isn't really there, yeah, then if error may be a good thing to do. But just be mindful of that. So you don't just put if errors everywhere, and sometimes a genuine error that needs to be addressed is overlooked. Okay, so that's just something I thought to point out. I know I have, VLOOKUP to the left. Do I want to do that? Okay, maybe I just show that, just because, we are here. Maybe that'll be the last thing I'll just do in this video. And I know I'll leave it at that. Okay, so I was saying that you cannot do a VLOOKUP to the left without being tricky. So this is what I want to do here. I have the IDs, right? And I want to return the spots. Okay, so it means I'm looking up to the left. If I'm looking up to the right, it's simple, but to the left, that wouldn't work. So how would I do this? I would just use a choose function. Let me show you what the choose function is doing internally. So if you do choose, and you then say, look, so the index is the first thing, normally, you know how the choose works. If you have James, Victor, and Lion. Okay, if you say choose 2 from this, it means you have given it 3 values. It's going to return the second one, so it's going to give you Victor, right? So that's basically it. If you wanted to get maybe 1 and 2, meaning the first and the second, you could have done something like this. So you use an array construct, okay, and say I want 1 and 2. Right now in Excel, this works easily, so it gives you the first and second. So what you could do for this is you could do a choose function. You tell it you want 1 and 2. Then for the first one, you tell it that this is what you want, which is what you are looking up, what you want returned. You select that. Okay, and then you close the bracket. Now, do you see what Excel has done? Because you've told it that C3 to C10 is 1, it brings that first, and then football is B3 to B10. You said that is 2. It puts that. So you more or less just use the choose function to reorder it. Okay, so the choose function has helped you reverse that. It has made the staff ID column 1 and it has made the spot column 2. Now this structure is what the VLOOKUP can consume, and that's how it works. So what I'm doing essentially is this. I'm doing a VLOOKUP here. I look for this ID. Now for my table array, instead of drawing the box around the whole thing, I pull up the choose function and I say choose 1, 2. So it now says what is 1? Oh, this is 1. 1 is staff ID. Okay, I select that. What is 2? 2 is what? Spot. So internally, that's the good thing. When we used to do this back in the day, when it didn't used to spill to the grid, it was difficult to see what was going on. But when you see it spill, you now see what happens. It just reverses it. It takes the first selection as column 1, it takes the next one as column 2, irrespective of how they are arranged on the table array here. So I select this as 2. So now I close the choose. So that's done. Then for my column index, I need column 2, obviously, right? Because that will be my spot column now. I need an exact match. Okay, so and then you can see that with that, the VLOOKUP is able to look to the left. That's just by using the choose function with the VLOOKUP. Okay, I think I have done justice to the VLOOKUP function. I would say, finally, that the XLOOKUP function is more versatile. It can do pretty much. I say that cautiously because maybe I may run into one example tomorrow that, the VLOOKUP may be preferred to the XLOOKUP, but it can do pretty much everything the VLOOKUP can do, and it's more like an improvement on the VLOOKUP. The default value where you have an approximate match, it's an exact match over there in XLOOKUP. XLOOKUP can find the first instance and the last instance, so you don't need to write another function or transform your data. XLOOKUP can do that. XLOOKUP also internally has its own if error. Here, if you have an if error, you say do blank. XLOOKUP has an argument if not found, it gives you that value. So there are a couple of, things that the XLOOKUP, definitely can do that the VLOOKUP can. But, while you're still using the VLOOKUP, I think these are a few things that if you go through and master, you will be better at using the VLOOKUP. I just felt it was good I made the video as elaborate as this, just to make sure that many people can benefit from it. Those who are just starting off, those who know a little, and those who know even much more than I do. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you do or did, whichever case it is, please hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel Excel Moments. It wasn't an easy video to create because I wanted to talk through it once rather than break up the recording, so you may hear me slow, a few places, but I think I'm human at the end of the day. So thank you, for your time, and you can use the timestamps to move across the video if you don't want to sit through it. But if you do sit through it, I guess it will be very beneficial. So for now, I'm signing out.